Thank you. Well, welcome everyone to the meeting of Cabinet. My name is Jonathan Lester. I'm the leader of the council, so I will be chairing the meeting. In addition to those councillors present in the room, we have other councillors in attendance, and we also have group leaders and chairs of scrutiny. Officers who are also in attendance and will be introduced when called upon. So I will now formally open the meeting. The agenda papers and other relevant information for this meeting are available for public viewing on Herefordshire Council's website. The Council is streaming this meeting live on Herefordshire Council's YouTube channel and making a recording. To ensure that the recording quality is maintained, please speak as clearly as possible and keep background noise to a minimum. Microphones should be muted when you're not speaking. If you have an issue with your microphone, please let the clerk know and we will allocate you a new microphone. Please make sure that mobile phones and other devices like laptops, etc., are muted. Others are permitted to film, photograph and record the public meetings, provided that it does not disrupt the business of the meeting. If any members of the public attending do not wish to be filmed or photographed, please notify a member of staff. As we move through the agenda, in addition to the discussion by Cabinet members, I will invite group leaders or their representatives to indicate if they wish to speak on any views or ask questions and raise items and views of their group. Where appropriate, I will also call on scrutiny chairpersons to comment on behalf of their committee. Voting will be undertaken by a show of hands in the room. So we now move forward to agenda item 1. Have we received any apologies for absence?
Only from Councillor Hercombe and Councillor Mason, I believe.
Okay, thank you. Do we have an apology from Councillor Davis?
Not formally, but I believe she's on holiday.
Right, okay, well, can we please note that she's on annual leave? Thank you. Agenda item 2 is declarations of interests. Are there any Table A, Table B, or any other interests on items for the agenda today? None. Thank you. So we move on to agenda item 3, which is minutes of the previous meeting. No matters of accuracy have been notified to the monitoring officer about the draft minutes. Cabinet members, are you content that the meeting minutes of the 13th of January are an accurate record and should be signed? All in favour? Yep. Thank you. Agenda item 4 is to receive any questions from members of the public. Members of the public have the opportunity to submit questions to Cabinet in writing ahead of the meeting. We have received 6 public questions for this meeting, and the response to each has been published as a supplement to the agenda papers. Those who have submitted a question have been given the opportunity to submit a written supplementary or attend the meeting and ask their question live. Supplemental questions are to be no more than 1 minute in length and must include a question. I will now ask the clerk to confirm if any supplementary questions have been received.
We've received 3 public supplementary questions. The first 2 are in person and 1 which is written. So would you like to deal with the in-person questions first?
Yes, please.
So the first supplementary question is from Mrs. Morieskia.
The Cabinet member has not answered the question asked and has now contradicted an answer he gave at Cabinet just 10 days ago, where he said in answer to another public question that the Hereford Western Bypass is at full business case stage. Just because the Cabinet is committed to the Southern Link Road does not mean that this scheme offers best value for money for taxpayers and will deliver on the objectives. For this reason, the Council's own capital strategy says that an option appraisal is carried out before a scheme is included in the capital programme. If the Cabinet member is now saying there is no option appraisal, no updated transport model for the Southern Link Road, What are the reasons for Cabinet to ignore their own rules in the Capital Strategy Report and include the Southern Link Road and the related borrowing in their capital programme? And why did he say there was a full business case for the Western Bypass just last week?
Thank you for the question. And Councillor Price? Oh, Councillor Stoddart.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Mrs. Morawiecki, for your supplementary. I have to say, I don't recall responding to you previously on this, but we've got the response there. I go by the response that the officers have sent you, that at the minute it's an outline business case, and as we go to full business case and the street business case, that will include the appraisal there. So at the minute the project is sitting in outline business case position.
Sorry, it was your colleague, Councillor Price, who assured the members of the public you had got a full business case for the Western Bypass, and you've just approved the minutes recording that.
Councillor Price, any comments?
Well, I thank you for your supplementary question. I was not aware that I had said that, and if it says that in the minutes, well, I haven't picked that up. But the full business case is being worked on, and that has been my response for most of this administration, that we are working on a full business case, and that will be available from May, June, July time.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, is the Cabinet member...
No. Sorry, the question
his-
has been
his written
the question has been answered. So
Sorry, I'm just
thank you
seeking
very much.
clarification from the monitoring officer. Is Councillor Price contradicting the written
Sorry.
question
So
to
the
the last
monitor,
Cabinet
Mrs.
meeting?
Morawiecka, the monitoring officer is not giving advice to your question. You've asked your question. You've received answers. Thank you very much.
Okay, sorry, I thought the Cabinet member might want some advice.
Okay. The next question is from Mr. Milne.
I'll unscramble unfamiliar acronyms for the benefit of our global audience, which may take me slightly over the minute. With a delicious hubris and without adequate evidence, Councillor Price assures us, in his response to Mrs. Morawiecka, that the Southern Link Road will, quote-unquote, demonstrate a positive cost-benefit ratio, and to mine that any impacts will be fully mitigated, and on that basis commits to borrow 30 million. But we learn that, in fact, his administration is not at full business case stage. It lacks the options appraisal, updated transport model, and impact assessment needed before the design can be reviewed and the business case developed. And with that review and assessment evidence gathered, we may find that sustainable transport options are a better fit than building motor-only roads. That is the proper order of things. Gather the evidence first, study it carefully, then make a decision, and make it a rational one that best delivers on cost and objectives for society and the environment. How then will the Cabinet member adopt this necessary approach to his decision-making?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Milne. And Councillor Price.
Thank you, Mr. Milne. As I've just said, the full business case review, environmental studies is in place for later on this year. This is not my decision. This is a Cabinet decision taken collectively. We are in favour of doing this work. We've allotted funding to be able to get to a stage where we can get to the full business case and review, and we will mitigate what we find at that point. We have been at this stage before, and we have to redo a lot of that work, so we're not taking anything from previously. We're reviewing it all, and we will see where that takes us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Price, and thank you very much for that question. We have another question from Mr. Kay. Mr. McKay, is that supplementary question written?
It is, yes. I'll
Thank you.
just bring it up. So the supplementary question is, thank you for agreeing to consider my suggestion when work is undertaken to produce the next right-of-way improvement plan, which could be expected to reference an evidence base Do you not accept that the submission of a way as a CRF by parish meeting when the map was raised is good evidence of a prior higher status than footpath, and that with this coming about due to incorrect government guidance that use the non-statutory terms CRF and CRB rather than the statutory RUPP? Will you seek additional funding to cover the cost of addressing the resulting issues? And sorry, this is for the Cabinet Member for Transport and Infrastructure.
Councillor Price.
Yes, thank you, Mr. McKay, for his supplementary question. Thank you for your supplementary question. Public rights of way were recorded on the definitive map with their status at the time of recording. As the map is a legal document, it can only be changed by a legal process. Any claim for a higher status therefore needs to follow the definitive map modification order. Any evidence of a higher status should be provided to support any application for such a modification order. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Price, and thank you for the question, Mr. McKay. The next item on the agenda is agenda item 5, which is any questions received from councillors of this council. We have received one question, and that's from Councillor Hitchener, and he is here in person, so I presume you would like to ask your supplementary.
Yes, please, Leader.
Please go ahead. Thank you.
I'm not surprised that Councillor Price has sidestepped my question. As the Cabinet Member responsible for the road projects when this report was completed in 2018, it must have been embarrassing to receive it, as it provides no support whatsoever for the proposition that the building of the Southern Link Road would reduce traffic on the new bridge. Maybe he's hoping that the new report will provide a different answer, but I doubt that it will, and I'm not sure that it matters to Councillor Price anyway. Could Councillor Price please let the people of Herefordshire know whether it is this administration's intention to go ahead with the building of the SLR, regardless of the lack of positive impact on traffic over the new bridge? Could you be straight with Herefordshire's residents and say that they will have to wait until the whole of the bypass is built for traffic to possibly improve? And I deliberately say possibly, because I dread to think of the impact on Hereford's traffic of an additional 10,000 homes, 15,000 vehicles and 30,000 people. I urge Councillor Price and the Cabinet to look again at the Eastern Bridge option, which will deliver traffic time savings much more quickly and at a much lower cost.
Thank you for the question, and Councillor Price.
I think I've probably answered this question dozens of times over the past few years. We have decided that we would look at the Western bypass option against the Eastern River crossing a year or so back because we feel that the funding opportunities that will be afforded to us because it is doing a road infrastructure project that matches Highways in England, I say Highways England, it's National Highways now, for the A49 trunk road. The Eastern River crossing does not do that. I have, on a daily basis, people telling me, will you get on and build the Western bypass? I have people saying to me, is East better or is West better? So the evidence that we're accruing together for the middle of this summer, by July, will give us at least the basis for the full business case and how we then approach government for the funding to build it. Yes, we do have a problem in that we are mandated to build another 11,000 houses over and above what the local plan for last year was suggesting for this council. We don't know where that's going to take us either at this moment in time because the local plan has had to reverse back from where it was and to be re-established. So all in all, there will be fresh evidence coming forward this summer as to whether this is the right way to go forward or not, and that will give us the evidence to support funding from government. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Price. And we now move to reports from scrutiny committees, which is agenda item 6. So at this item, we have a report from the Scrutiny Management Board on page 11 of the agenda pack. Scrutiny Management Board met on the 14th of January to scrutinise the budget. Councillor Proctor, as the chair of that meeting, is here in person, and I invite you to make any comments and introduce the item, please.
Thank you, Leader. First, I would like, on behalf of the committee, to recognise the hard work
that has gone into preparing the draft budget from officers and from members. Assembling a budget for an organisation on the scale of Herefordshire Council is challenging at the best of times, and these are not the best of times. I'd just like to explain some of the context for our recommendations. Our recommendations are divided into three broad areas: revenue pressures, substantial capital ambitions, and medium-term picture. So in terms of revenue pressures, the loss of the Rural Services Grant, other grants, the impact of inflation, national insurance, and the increase in need, especially in adult services, has contributed to considerable pressure on the revenue budget. That reflects our recommendation number one, which is to receive more information about the planned improvements around adult social care, an assessment of the likely impact they will have on mitigating future budget pressures in the medium term, and analysis of the future demands on the service, and the Cabinet, I'm pleased to say, has accepted that. It also relates to recommendation 3, that the budget include a more realistic estimate of the interest likely to be received through Treasury management. The Executive has provided a very detailed explanation of why the estimate is included as it is, which I personally have found very helpful. It's worth highlighting that the current year's budget includes substantial savings targets, of which £5 million around from transformation were at risk at Q2. And if those savings are not delivered, this will substantially worsen the revenue position for the next financial year. So I'm sure the Cabinet is focused on that. The committee also noted the reprofiling of the savings targets in children's services, and I think the committee was inclined to think that this reflects improved grip and understanding of the cost pressures in the service. In terms of capital, the Cabinet is proposing a very significant capital programme for 25-26. SNB has been encouraging Cabinet to get better at delivering capital projects as planned, and this year the Executive is on target to deliver substantially more capital spend than in previous years, albeit following a reprofile of the original budget. Even so, the committee has concerns that the capital spend budgeted for 25-26 is unrealistic based on past performance, and that formed the basis of recommendation 2, that the capital programme be reprofiled over the lifetime of the programme. The Cabinet has not accepted that recommendation. That's you're entitled to do that, and we will see who's right, I guess. It's striking that the capital programme includes a substantial increase in prudential borrowing. SNB has previously recommended that the Council make more use of borrowing to deliver its priorities, and the amount of borrowing is not in itself a concern, but given the constrained revenue position, the revenue consequences of this borrowing are likely to have consequences for future administrations in terms, and I think that should be thought through very carefully. And then thinking about the medium term, the committee heard that there's considerable uncertainty around the medium-term financial plan, largely due to uncertainty within UK government. Councillor Stoddart said at the last Cabinet meeting that the medium-term financial strategy could potentially be reviewed in year as more and reprofiled as more information emerged from the government around spending reviews and other important revenue matters. That seems very prudent, and the committee looks forward to seeing those revisions. Cabinet has stated that the revenue and capital budgets are shaped to deliver the council plan, but the committee has struggled to see these links. The committee would have benefited from a draft delivery plan making these links explicit, and we also felt the capital strategy could outline more fully how the Executive proposes to use capital programmes in future years to deliver council priorities, and these led to our recommendations 4 and 5, and we will pick them up in our future work programme. And to finish, I'd like to thank all members of the committee for their work on this scrutiny project. I'd like to thank the officers who supported us before the committee and during the committee, and thank Cabinet members and officers who attended our public meeting and seized the opportunity to explain the decisions underpinning the draft budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Proctor. And yes, I would like to thank the Scrutiny Management Committee for giving this matter, such an important matter, all of your attention. And thank you for making these recommendations. Councillor Stoddart, can I ask you to respond on behalf of the Cabinet with regard to our thoughts on the recommendations and our responses, please?
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Proctor, for your report. I can confirm that the S141 officer has provided a very detailed and detailed written response, which I hope answers and addresses each of your points. As you say, we'll go through, we keep an open mind to everything, and we look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. So, to Cabinet, you have the responses to the recommendations in front of you. I'll propose from the Chair. You all content that the recommendations have been adequately addressed and taken on board? Everyone happy with that? Yep. All in favour? Thank you very much. Next is agenda item 7, which is the Budget, Medium-Term Financial and Treasury Management Strategy. And the item is to recommend to Council the proposal of the revenue budget for 2025-2026, the Medium-Term Financial Strategy and the Treasury Management Strategy. This item begins on page 17 of the agenda pack, and I would now like to ask Councillor Stoddart to introduce the item. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leader. When I introduced the 2025-26 draft revenue budget to Cabinet on the 13th of January, I stated that this was a draft budget and that I would have it provide information on our consultation when I spoke next. Sadly, engagement across the county was low despite attempts to engage with a wider audience using the new simulator tool this year. However, those respondents who did participate showed strong support across the key areas of some of the proposed additions to our capital programme. These include continue to invest in improvements to the road network, which is at 91%, invest in a prevention and maintenance programme to strengthen resilience and reduce and mitigate the impact for residents and communities at 87%, maximise the use of council's assets and resources to reduce revenue pressures at 83%, invest in measures to improve road safety and reduce road casualties across the county of 78%, and invest in playgrounds and spaces for play to encourage active lifestyles for children and young people at 73%. We've also spoken with many council members and have provided additional information to Scrutiny Management, including 3 hours with them on the 14th of January. The provisional settlement announced by Central Government on the 18th of December confirmed the abolition of the Rural Services Delivery Grant and Services Grant and confirmed that Herefordshire would receive 0 funds under the new Recovery Grant and £360,000 under the new Children's Social Care Prevention Grant, providing us with a net loss of £6.766 million against the previous year's income. The redistribution of these grants, which had been removed, have not, I repeat, not been directed towards the residents of Herefordshire. I'm sorry to announce that following significant lobbying of central government for the Rural Services Network, the County Council Network, the Local Government Association and the Society of County Treasurers, the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government have not provided any additional funding to rural counties, including Herefordshire. This is in spite of the Rural Services Network confirming that rural areas continue to face higher costs and reduced services compared with their urban counterparts, with rural residents paying on average 20% more in council tax than urban areas, with urban areas receiving 41% more in government funding. I believe a very stark comparison. We do, however, await final confirmation of our final allocations in the final settlement, which is expected later this month. The provisional settlement announced by Central Government on the 18th of December confirmed, as I say, that we would receive £369,000, giving us a loss of £6.76 million. Our Herefordshire Council in 2025-26, based on provisional allocations, expects to receive Central Government grant funding totalling £29.2 million, which represents a reduction of £3 million from the previous year, as shown in Table 2 of the report in front of you. The reduction in central government grants results in less funding per head than urban areas, despite the increased costs of service delivery to rural communities. To maintain services and deliver the best for our residents, the Council is therefore increasingly more reliant on funding through council tax than its urban counterparts. And furthermore, the removal of this funding places increased pressure on the Council to manage the impact of continuing growth in demand and costs for our services. It also limits the Council's ability to build upon its strong financial position and maximise opportunities to deliver ambitious improvements for our residents. In spite of the challenges and central government's reduction in grant funding, I'm very pleased today to announce that following a Herculean effort by both Council officers and Cabinet members, we have achieved a balanced budget for financial year 2025-26. The revenue budget for 25-26 totals £231.5 million. The draft budget totaled £232 million, and the movement is as a result of the additional homelessness and rough sleeping grant being presented within the community wellbeing budget, as this is where the corresponding expenditure is included. The MTFS approved last year for 24-25 out to 27-28 showed a planned level of 3.99% increase in council tax. And until the provisional settlement was issued on the 18th of December, this was our intention. However, due to the impact of central government's reduction in our funding, we have therefore had to accept a 4.99% increase in council tax for 2025-26. We are aware that there are a number of residents who may struggle with this increase, and later on in this meeting I'll bring forward a proposal in regards to continuing the council tax reduction scheme. Looking at each of the directors' budgets, as shown at paragraph 41 of the report, will show that community wellbeing sees an increase of its base budget of £14.786 million, approximately 20%, to a total of £90.677 million. And this increase will support growth in demand and complexity of care. Children and young people includes additional funding for pressures in 25-26, but overall sees its base budget reduced by 473k to 59.063 million as a result of the continued savings in that directorate. Economy and Environment sees its base budget increased by £4 million, or approximately 10%, to 42.415 million. Corporate Services will see its budget increase by £2.5 million, approximately 8%, to 22.852 million. And Central Services, which includes financing transactions, minimum revenue provision, and other corporate budget items, will see its base budget reduced by £1.4 million, or approximately reduced by 8% to £16.5 million. This leads to a proposed revenue budget of £231.508 million, an increase of 9% on the 2024-25 base budget. This budget will be funded by council tax at £146.451 million, or 63%, business rates at £47.567 million, or 20.5%, social care support grant at £20.336 million, or 9%, extended producer responsibility grant at £3.538 million, or 1.5%, the other smaller grants making up the remaining £13.9 million, or 6%. However, each directorate faces a number of unfunded pressures totalling £27.6 million, which have been factored into their base budgets for 2025-26. And these factors include the pay award. This pressure represents an impact on the estimated pay award for 25-26 on staffing expenditure across all directorates. National insurance, direct impact. This pressure represents the direct impact of increases in the rate and thresholds for employers' national insurance on the council's pay bill. It is expected that this pressure will be funded by government, although that we await to have that confirmed in the final settlement, and the proposed draft budget includes an estimated funding of £1.5 million. Inflation. This pressure represents the impact of inflation across contractual and non-contractual commitments in financial year 25-26. Inflation is estimated based on a variety of relevant inflation and price indices, as well as contract-specific rates. Inflation is funded at 90% in this revenue budget, as in the previous financial year. And finally, demand. Demand pressures reflect additional demand for services based on most recent activity data and costs. This pressure includes adjustments to reflect trend analysis and planned transformational activity in each service area. We await the final settlement from government to confirm our final allocations for 25-26. This budget assumes that the additional direct impact of changes in employers' national insurance of £1.5 million will be totally funded by central government, and this will be confirmed in our final settlement. If this final settlement includes funding above what we assumed in this revenue budget, we would then propose the following. Firstly, to make additional provision to support development of the local plan, which, as we're aware, is an additional 11,000 houses under the NPFF. And secondly, to make a transfer to the Financial Resilience Reserve to mitigate the potential unfavourable outcome of the Fair Funding Review, which is planned in 2025. The medium-term financial strategy is the Council's key financial planning document and sets out the Council's budget for 2025-26 and the financial plan for the next 3 years to the period 2028-2029. Table 1 shows a cumulative funding gap of 4.198 million over the medium-term financial planning period, with a figure of 5.08 million in the financial year 28-29, which represents 1.7% of the total revenue budget. This gap is considered manageable and will be resolved in future years through continued transformation. Whilst there are significant challenges ahead, this MTFS ensures that the Council's finances are aligned to its strategic priorities with a clear focus on transformation to ensure the financial sustainability of the Council and the services that it delivers. The Treasury Management Strategy at Appendix D has been prepared to comply with the with central government statutory requirement on local government investments, government on minimum revenue provision, and the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy (CIPFA) code for capital finance in local governments. The borrowing strategy is that the Council borrows to fund the capital expenditure, with borrowing driven by the requirements of the approved capital investment budget. The objective of the borrowing strategy is to manage the risk of current and potential future debt. The current loan debt of 118 million.116 is detailed at Annex A. The objective of the investment strategy is to ensure prudence is applied and risks are managed when the Council holds surplus funds, that is, income received in advance of expenditure. As at the 31st of October 2024, the Council has £64.1 million of investments spread across banks, other local authorities and money market funds, and the current investment portfolio is detailed in Annex A. As part of our business as usual, we have carried out a review of interest receivable earned in the financial years from 2020-21 to 2023-24. This has highlighted the variability in levels of income from this source. In 2020-2021, an interest receivable budget of £200,000 was approved in the revenue budget. In 2020-21, actual interest earned was £165,000, £35,000 less than the budgeted amount. From 2021-22 to 2023-24, the revenue budget did not include a budget for interest receivable, and any interest receivable achieved in a year was used to manage the Council's overall financial position. In each of the financial years noted, interest receivable income has been recognised as it has been achieved and reported at the end of each quarter. In the 2024-25 financial year, interest receivable income of £1.6 million has been achieved to date against a planned budget of £0.5 million, as reported in the Q2 2024-25 budget report. A prudent estimate is assumed as part of budget setting for 25-26, and income achieved above this budgeted value will be reported once the flow of economic benefit to the Council is probable, that is, at the end of each quarter end, as in previous years, and in line with accounting principles. And finally, the earmarked reserves at Appendix E show that our forecast reserves as at the 31st of March 2025 will be £75.1 million. In conclusion, and bearing in mind the context of the wider poor economic situation that surrounds us, I would like to remind Cabinet that we have achieved a deliverable balanced budget of £231.5 million. that our medium-term financial strategy shows that we're able to deliver balanced budgets over the 4-year period of the strategy, and finally, that we have strong reserves which will only increase as we begin to pay surpluses back into them. This is a situation that many other local authorities would wish to find themselves in. I therefore have no hesitation in recommending this draft budget and request that Cabinet approve all 8 recommendations, plus the proposal for allocation if additional funding is received, and that this goes forward to full council on the 7th of February. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stoddart. Thank you very much for that. And once again, thank you to you and to the finance team for all of the hard work that's been going on for quite some time to get to this position where we have a proposal that balances. Much appreciated. So last Cabinet meeting on the 13th, we went through in some detail our responses to the budget and the proposals that we've got in front of us. And that was before the Scrutiny Management Board had a chance to look at the budget in greater detail. But now we've got those recommendations, and we have not had any news as yet about the final settlement, have we? And I'm reliably informed that it's going to be in early February. But do we know any more about when that will be?
As far as we're aware, Leader, it's late January into early February, so no change.
Okay. Right, Cabinet members, any particular comments that you'd like to make or any additions? I know I've got one point that I will raise, but Councillor Swinglehurst.
Thank you, Leader. First of all, I really want to congratulate Councillor Stoddart and the 151 officer and finance team for the quality of their work, and particularly the excellent quality of this report. They've done an amazing job. It's very difficult. I think as Councillor Prox remarks, it's never easy. It's particularly difficult at the moment. And I also would like to particularly welcome consideration being given for any additional funding for some of that to go to support the production of the local plan. As you know, our local plan had gone through Reg 18, but the changes consequential to the government's MPPF and our housing numbers going from 16,100 to 27,260 mean that we'll have to restart that process. I personally think that it's in the best interest of the County of Herefordshire to have a plan-led system, not to have planning by appeal. So I very much welcome the consideration being given to that. Looking back at the government's local government finance policy statement in November, they said, and I quote, on average, places where the significant rural population will receive around a 5% increase in their core spending power next year. This real terms funding increase demonstrates how this government stands behind rural councils. I would like to ask the Cabinet member, how does he feel this statement is translated for Herefordshire?
Quite simply, poorly. Whatever way we look at it, we have received a £3 million. I'll just check my figures. Excuse me. We have received a reduction in a years. It's £3 million, which is approximately 2%. So I have to say I take umbrage with central government that they may speak the speak of the wish to support rural communities. The reality of the walk is a lot less than that, and we are suffering a significant reduction of £3 million in our funding. And no matter how you try to sway that or how you try to show it, that is the reality. And I mentioned earlier in the figures that the RSN have provided, which is that rural communities pay generally more than 20% higher council tax than urban counties, but yet urban communities get 41% more government spending. Whichever way you look at that, it's bad news for rural counties. Thank you very much.
And any other questions from Cabinet members? No. Councillor Stoddart, we talked about the final settlement, the final settlement, and last year we received a little bit extra from the final settlement, and so there was a decision had to be made about how we would allocate that little bit of extra funding, which was really welcome. But in the event that there is a final settlement where there is some extra funding from government, have you any thoughts as to how that should be allocated.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I did mention that. But of course, last year we received an additional £953,000 in a rural grant. That, as you know, we spent £250,000 on the Lensman scheme, another £250 on PROW, and £453,000 on our rural drainage scheme. That £953,000 has been built into this revenue budget, so therefore E&E will have that additional funding. Whilst I do not expect us to get anything, should we do receive anything, then the first thing we have to make sure that is that 1.5 million pounds of direct national insurance costs are covered. Once that is done and assured, then we would look at providing, as Councillor Swinglehurst mentioned, we'd look to provide additional funding to support the quite significant work that's going to be done to get that local plan by the end of next year. And then secondly, we would then look to bring anything above that into a financial resilience reserve to mitigate any potential future outcomes of the fair funding review in 2025. So we tried to do it on 3 levels. Thank you.
Okay. And would you recommend adding that as a recommendation to the agenda item?
Yes.
Because it sets out a strategy in the event of there is some extra monies. Hopefully the reinstigation of the Rural Services Grant in recognition of the important role it plays. But let's see what happens.
Certainly, Leader, I would, as I said, so we'd look to approve all 8 plus the proposal for allocations if additional funding is recovered.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Right. Okay, then if there are no other... Oh, Councillor Price.
Yeah, you asked the question of Councillor Stoddart, and I absolutely support what he says there, because the likelihood of us getting more money is pretty remote, but there's been a lot of pressure on government being brought about rural counties getting more. So I would absolutely support his recommendation to put any extra money, should we have it, into that sector. I would support that. Thank you.
Thank you. And I take it from all other Cabinet members, you would agree with that additional recommendation? Thank you. Okay, well, we move to the item now where we can refer to group leaders. I note Councillor James has joined us remotely. Can I just check, Councillor James, that you can hear us okay?
Yeah, I can hear you okay. Unfortunately, I don't seem to be able to get my camera to work.
Okay, never mind. So long as you can hear the proceedings and contribute accordingly, then that's good. We know what you look like, so we're good. Right, okay. So in no particular order, group leaders wish to speak. Councillor Toynbee?
I was pointing at Councillor James because I thought he might want to speak while he's on, but that's fine. Yes, I'll go. Thank you. Right, okay, shall I keep going?
What happens when you put your hand up?
Yeah. Yeah, so thank you. Yes, Green councillors have been very involved in the journey of this budget, and we're very grateful for how responsive the finance team have been. We've really appreciated that. Yeah, how frustrating. We're all frustrated that we still have no final settlement from the government. It seems unbelievable, but it's true. And so let's hope it will cover all our national insurance costs. I've just got a couple of points. One is about the Extended Producer Responsibility Fund, which is an absolutely huge windfall. And I think, and it's been included in the overall total funding. So I think Councillor Stoddart in his introduction mentioned a net loss of over 6 million, but then just now in a response he mentioned 3 million. So I assume that he is now taking into account that windfall from the Extended Producer Responsibility, which is huge, and sort of half of what we lost in the Rural Services Grant. As far as that Extended Producer Responsibility funding is concerned, you know, as Greens, given that the funding is a product of the Environment Act and is aimed at protecting the environment, you know, we would like to have seen some reflection of that in the way that it's spent, rather than it just being thrown into the big pot with everything else. Cabinet have referred frequently to a medium-term financial strategy drawn up last year based on a level of a 3.99% increase in council tax. Can we find that somewhere? Because the only MTFS I can find from last year is based on an increase of 4.99%. And finally, just a small point about the budget consultation. The question about maximising the use of assets. I think in future it might be useful to spell out. I think some residents are a little bit suspicious that might be a euphemism for selling things off, and people feel quite strongly about selling off the assets that we all own in common. So it might be useful to clarify that in future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Toynbee. Cabinet will come back to debate those points. But Councillor Harvey?
Thank you, Leader. And Independence for Herefordshire would also like to extend our thanks to Chief Executive and Section 151 Officer for the briefings to political groups at a time when there are lots of other calls on your time, and you've been very heavily involved in putting the budget together in the first place. So thank you for that, and well done to Cabinet for being able to bring forward a balanced budget in the particularly strained circumstances that you're facing. So we don't underestimate the challenge, and congratulate you on where you've got to. As a group, we do feel that given that you are taking the maximum uplift in council tax, that it would, we're disappointed not to see some additional targeted support being made available to hard-up households. We know that further on in the agenda we've got a proposal to continue the 100% discount on council tax for households that qualify, but equally I'm sure every member of the Cabinet is aware that there are households that fall just short of the qualification for that, but nevertheless in various ways find themselves in very straitened circumstances. It is something that we committed to as an administration when we had to take the maximum uplift, and certainly providing targeted support does provide disproportionate level of aid to people at the lowest end of the income spectrum, and we're sorry not to see that there. Also, we're sorry not to see some provision being made for funding officer time to work up new investment projects and ideas. Certainly in Herefordshire, it's something we've heard over and over again, that when government does put a calling out at very short notice for what they rather unpleasantly refer to as shovel-ready projects, we're in a difficult position because we haven't got the resource to hand to be able to have developed projects to that shovel-ready stage. And given that we have a capital strategy document, whether or not we all agree it's a strategy in actuality, that certainly presents ambition and expectation, and its latter years will need to be populated with projects that aren't necessarily currently part of the programme. So we think it would be timely for the council to make some provision for that, and we do feel that the under-egging of the expectation in terms of income from interest is a place that you could have gone, rather than just forecasting to get £600,000 from interest earned, when you have evidence there before you that there is a significant over-delivery in year, particularly over the last 3 years, on income received from interest. We think that's an opportunity missed. I mean, clearly there's a benefit in terms of having that in your back pockets or officers' back pockets, but we also feel if the circumstances are as straitened as they are, that really it should be put to councillors and to council as to how that money gets spent, rather than moved around behind the scenes. Finally, I mean, obviously this budget looks very, very similar to the draft one that you looked at a couple of weeks ago, and I think possibly the largest difference is the change in Councillor Stoddart's choice of metaphor from the rather worrying Titanic to the rather more robust Herculean in terms of the efforts that everybody's put in. So we're very pleased to see that too. Thank you.
only you would have spotted that. But well done. Shows you're paying real attention as usual. Right. Okay. Councillor James.
Yeah, thanks. I agree with the two previous speakers. I'd like to congratulate on probably the most consultative process that's taken part in many years on the budget. And I think we've moved to a place where there is a general consensus that we have to move forward and be careful how we move, bearing in mind the current situation nationally and internationally. Would just add, I think we're probably getting to a more realistic budgeting than we used to. We've had for many years, whereby we pass a budget and then we find we're about 10 million out on it within 6 months. I hope that we'll get nearer to actually fulfilling what we actually intend to do, what we plan to do. That the figures are more realistic than they have been over many years. So with that, I don't think there's much more I want to say.
Thank you very much, Councillor James. Thank you to group leaders for their contributions and observations. With the right, first of all, Cabinet, with regard to the point about the medium-term financial strategy, that it was 3.99% last year. It's a matter of public record, and that information is being shared. I think Councillor Toynbee will share that information with you. But it's one of those key figures that's stuck in my mind because that's what I requested. But given the situation financially, as Councillor Stoddart has pointed out, that aspiration cannot be achieved under this financial, the financial weather that we are experiencing at the moment with regard to government funding. The point about, I'd be interested in Councillor Stoddart's view, the point about maximising the assets isn't framed in a way that it's selling council assets. It's, if anything, acquiring council assets to reduce the spend, the revenue pressures. Would you agree with that, Councillor Stoddart?
Thank you. Yes, as I mentioned on the 13th, and I'll reiterate now, one of the aspects that we wish to now do, and we'll discuss this when we go into the next item, the capital programme, is capital projects tend traditionally, you build or you buy or you do something, and that then has a negative impact because you've got to run it, you've got to look after it, and so on and so forth. What we've tried to do in this year's capital programme is to look at it through a different prism, and what we're looking to do is to generate projects that actually are cost neutral or generate a positive impact into our revenue budget. And we'll go through a number of those projects when we go into the next item, but we can see how that runs. And I can certainly assure Councillor Toynbee, we're definitely not looking at selling off the family silver.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. And we have been fortunate to have the extended producer responsibility, but would you? Well, I'm not putting words in your mouth, but would you disagree with the idea that it's just being thrown into a pot and being distributed in a way that doesn't support our drive to improve the environment?
Very much so. We have, through our environmental programme and through our waste programme, including our new waste contracts come through, we're delivering that already. This grant came to us outside of core funding. Myself and Cabinet took a very long, hard look at how could we look at this. As Councillor Toynbee said, we looked at initially when we looked at the grant, we were down from the 6.76 million from the Rural Services grant. Through some work, we ended up still with an underspend, and therefore we had to look at bringing that in. It was a harsh decision. And again, we expect at the minute, we understand it's a one-off single year. So again, we've got that to consider next year. But we therefore brought that in because what we want to do is to ensure that we deliver the services from a revenue perspective that the people of Herefordshire have every right to demand and expect. So that's why we brought that in there. But it was not done light-handedly. It was done with full due consideration. And as I say, through our waste contract, we're actually already meeting that already. Thank you.
And just for clarification purposes, isn't it the table that highlights how much grant funding is coming in and how much grant funding we no longer receive is on table 2, which is page 20 of the agenda pack. So for anyone who wants to reference the difference in funding between the 2 years, it is on pages 20 and 21, which is table 2. Thank you. So with regard to Councillor Harvey's point about the 4.99% and then the impact that will have on households, I am right in thinking that 11,000 households benefited from the council tax reduction scheme last year, so that reduction is there. And the concern, I think, was, I mean, we might have to replay this discussion later on, but I think the point was about making the point that sometimes people don't make the thresholds, but we also have another scheme, don't we, where there's a discretionary fund. So can I just clarify that point?
Yes, Leader. You'll see when we go on to this under council tax reduction, it's approximately 11,500, split between pension and working age elements. And I can confirm that in addition to the council tax reduction, we also have the discretionary hardship fund to deal with individual threshold cases.
Thank you very much. And finally, I note with interest the point about interest. And although the point may be that we're under egging it with regards to the contribution that it might yield to the council, Councillor Stoddard, would you, I presume the reason why we're accounting for it in the way we are is because you've been given the best financial advice, which says that you shouldn't base that into your budget. Is that not right? Very much so. We adopt a prudent approach, and accounting principles is that you plan for the worst case and expect the best. So effectively, looking at the last 4 or 5 years, it's highlighted to us the variability in the levels of income. I mentioned in the 2021 year, the previous administration budgeted for 200k of interest, and they got 165k. We're budgeted this current financial year, for 500,000, and we've got 1.6 coming in. So I'd much rather we have it that sort of figure, and that's the level of which we're going to in this year, in this current financial year 2025-26 budget. But the figures show the variety of figures that can come in. Thank you, Councillor Stoddard. And just finally to wrap up, because we have the recommendations for us, and we have an extra recommendation, do we not, about what to do in the event of we have some good news. So that would be recommendation I. But with regard to Councillor James, I thank him for appreciating the fact that this was a consultative process, and it's absolutely right that it should be that way, because at the end of the day, you know, the administration is charged with putting up a proposal, but ultimately this is a point that Councillor Biggs made last time, is that this is a council budget, and all councillors have to have the opportunity to reflect on it and see whether or not it's the right thing for this council, given all of its responsibilities, the pressures and all of the services we wish to provide. So thank you for going through that process with members. There's always room for extra consultation along the way, but there comes a point at which you have to put forward a proposal. And I think we've done significant work in trying to get a balance between coming up with the proposals, but at the same time listening to what members of the public and members and our partners have said. So here it is for now, pending a final settlement. And so I presume, Councillor Stoddard, you'd like to propose? I will gladly second all of those recommendations, including the extra recommendation I about what to do with extra funds should they emerge. And all Cabinet members, are you all in agreement? Thank you very much. So we now go on to agenda item 8, which is the capital investment budget and capital strategy update. So the item on 8 is to recommend to Council the proposed revised capital investment budget and capital strategy. The item begins on page 89, and I would ask Councillor Stoddart to introduce the item.
Thank you again, Leader. This report seeks to recommend to Cabinet the final version of the 2025-26 capital investment budget, together with the capital strategy for 2025-26 onwards. The capital programme reflects capital investment which generates benefit to the county for a period in excess of 1 year. There have been 2 minor changes to the report since I presented the draft to you all on the 13th of January 2025. The first is in paragraph 15, where it states we now aim to start construction of the scheme to the south of the city within the period 2026-27. And the second is in Appendix E, where each outline business case has now been amended to include their link to the various areas of the 4 aspects of the council plan. I would like to remind you all that inclusion in the capital programme is not approval to proceed, and that each project will be subject to its own governance. A full business case will be presented for approval where required and in full compliance with the Council's contract procedures and rules as applicable. The proposed capital programme for 2025-26 presents an ambitious programme of capital investment aligned to the priorities of the Council plan across people, place, growth and transformation. The public consultation from November to December shows strong support from respondents across the key areas of the proposed additions to the capital programme. These are namely continue to invest in improvements to the road network, 91%, invest in prevention and maintenance programme to strengthen resilience and mitigate the impact for residents and communities, 87%, maximise the use of council's assets and resources to reduce revenue pressures, 83%, invest in measures to improve road safety and reduce road casualties across the council, 78%. And then finally, invest in playgrounds and spaces for play to encourage active lifestyles for children and young people, 73%. The public consultation, therefore, supports the proposed additions of the 2025-26 capital programme, which will mitigate key revenue budget pressures, improve the use of technology to deliver efficiencies and innovation in services to residents, deliver new infrastructure to support growth opportunities for housing and businesses, encourage active lifestyles for children and young people through £1 million investment in play areas, develop cultural and community spaces for residents and visitors, strengthen resilience and reduce the impact of flooding with investment of £2 million, improve road safety across the county and provide continued investment in the county's road network. All of the proposals are included in Appendix A, together with outlined strategic business cases, which includes the respective area of the council plan at Appendix E. Appendix A provides details of the proposed additions to the existing capital programme that have been identified and the impact of approving these additions. 18 capital investment budget proposals totalling £58.15 million have been identified to be funded by prudential borrowing, capital receipts, reserves and revenue reserves. Capital receipts reserve and revenue reserves. These include a play area investment of £1 million, IT system upgrades, server replacements, £500,000, public realm services fleet, £1.54 million, public realm mobilisation, £450,000, property improvements in care homes, phase 2, £604,000, estates building improvement programme, 2025-27, £4,304,000, building works from the 2022 conditional surveys, £1.75 million, Yeazer Brook, £260,000, school route planning software, £50,000, resurfacing Herefordshire highways, £5 million, road safety schemes, £3 million, highways infrastructure investment, £5 million, city and market town public realm investment, £1.2 million, CCTV equipment upgrades, £89,000, Shire Hall refurbishment phase 2, £1 million, council school transport fleet, £350,000, Herefordshire flood risk mitigation, £2 million, and Hereford Western Bypass phase 1, £30 million. The capital strategy, which forms Appendix D of this report, has been developed in accordance with the SIPFA guidelines. The purpose of the capital strategy is to give a clear and concise view of how Herefordshire Council determines its priorities for capital investment, decides how much it can afford to borrow, and sets out its risk appetite. It should not duplicate other more detailed procedures and policies and plans, but instead sit above these and reference these to allow those seeking more detail to know where to find it. That said, it should still provide sufficient detail so that it provides an accessible single source for the reader. The strategy is included at Appendix D and, in line with the guidelines, requires Council approval. The capital investment proposals support the county plan and the associated delivery plan. The overall aim of capital expenditure is to benefit the community through improved facilities and promoting economic growth. A specific community impact assessment, including any health and safety implications, or corporate parenting responsibilities, will be included in the decision report for any new capital scheme commencing and incurring spend. Whilst this budget setting document will not detail specific environmental impact, considerations will always be made in minimising waste and resources in line with the Council's environmental policy. In conclusion, I fully endorse this report and propose that its 3 recommendations are approved by Cabinet and forwarded to full Council on the 7th of February. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stoddard, for that comprehensive assessment. Thank you. Cabinet members, any comments? Again, this was discussed on the 13th of January. Councillor Price?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Stoddart, for your report. Very eloquent as usual. In your highway safety element of £3 million, I think you've got, just to remind you how important this is, as yet again at the Locks Garage interchange junction, there was a road accident only last week where there was a death. So it is very important we keep the funding going for that. And over these last very dark, foggy nights, it has become quite relevant. A lot of people have said to me about the ability to be able to see on the roads at night when they're driving. There's something fundamentally gone wrong. There's too much traffic, too bright lights, poor roads, whatever. We're going to have to keep this in our back of our mind for future investment because, there's something amiss. We could say it's driver ability, but I suspect there's something else going on. So thank you for keeping that in there. Otherwise, I would actually like to second it when it comes around, when you propose it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Price. Any other comments from Cabinet members? We have discussed this previously, as I said. If not, then I'll go to group leaders. Anybody signifying that they wish to speak? Councillor Harvey, thank you.
Yes. Broadly speaking, Independents for Herefordshire are pleased to see the additions to the capital programme, all bar what we feel is a little bit of a premature funding in there for the Southern Link Road, when we haven't yet gone through all of the necessary due diligence with the funding that's already been made available to demonstrate that the project actually stands up to delivering value for money. We're just going to have to agree to disagree on that, but I would caution Cabinet to make sure that you are actually following all your own policies and procedures in the way that you handle this scheme and whatever it is you plan to do next for the Western Relief Road or Hereford Western Bypass, if that's what you're going to call it. Lots of eyes will be upon you, and you've already seen through public and councillor questions that there seem to be different messages being given and received, and I think you just need to really get on the same page and be very, very careful about the language that you use and make sure that the things that you say are actually backed up and can be evidenced. We still have concerns that the programme will not be delivered, but you can bet your bottom dollar that if Councillor Stoddart is saying anything less than this is being mundane rather than ambitious. we're going to jolly well make sure that, you know, you are held to account for delivering this programme if you say that it's deliverable. We don't think it is, and that a slightly different delivery profile would be more realistic whilst remaining ambitious. It's just a matter of phasing, not a matter of taking things out necessarily. But I'm sure if you say you're going to deliver it, we'll just have to wait and see, won't we? I don't want to have an I told you so moment a little early, but we will have an I told you so moment at some point in the coming year. I feel it in my bones.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Councillor Toynbee, yeah, thank you.
Yes, thank you. The Green Group welcomes nearly all this programme and the additions, and we're very aware that it's not just about what we do, but how we do it, and it's always useful to be reminded that each project is subject to its own governance. And from the environmental point of view, it's not just about minimising waste and resources, but it is about really thorough environmental impact assessments. So we'll be keeping an eye on that going forwards. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Councillor James.
Yes, can I be the first new group leader to welcome the inclusion of the Link Road as part of the bypass, something for which my group have campaigned for the last 20 years for. This is wanted by the public. The overwhelming majority of the public who are based in and around Hereford, and we're sick to death with people are sick to death with the negative attitude that many local politicians have towards this. We've got to realise that we have to do what the public want, not what we want as individuals. And so I'm delighted that we're moving forward in this particular area. People have for a long time prayed for this particular proposal to go forward. People who spend their time in queues in Hereford constantly, pumping out fumes from their exhausts whilst they wait to get through Hereford. I mean, I recently met someone who well, not recently met, I've met many people who say, I don't come to Hereford anymore because of the traffic. So it's good news, I hope, that for the citizens of Hereford and its surrounding area, Hereford may have a bypass, unlike the rest of the market towns in Herefordshire. So, other than that, I'll say no more than and welcome most of the proposals.
Thank you, Councillor James, and thank you to all group leaders for their comments. Yes.
One thing, just apologise. I had someone arrived who was supposed to be seeing me for an appointment now just before this afternoon. They've arrived and been waiting for over an hour and a half. So can I just give my support to the council tax reduction scheme on behalf of my group.
That's duly noted. Thank you, Councillor James. Okay, right. So it was proposed by Councillor Stoddart, and Councillor Price wanted to second the recommendations for the capital programme proposals to go to full council. So Cabinet is proposed and seconded. All in favour? Thank you. Excellent. So we now move to the agenda item 9, which is the annual review of earmarked reserves, to note and review the earmarked reserves held by the council. And this item begins on page 173 of the agenda pack. And sorry, Councillor Stoddart, we're asking you yet again to work hard this afternoon, but I would like to refer the matter to you to introduce the item.
Thank you very much, Leader. I'm very pleased to bring this report to Cabinet today. As this administration has stated on numerous occasions, we embrace openness and transparency in all that we do. This report, unlike previous years, includes in Appendix 1 the rationale for each of the earmarked reserves, together with the context of why the level is maintained at a particular level. Earmarked reserves represent amounts set aside for future expenditure, to support specific corporate priorities, or for general contingencies and cash flow management. The general fund balance is not allocated or earmarked for a specific purpose, but represents a strategic reserve to be used in the event of a major incident or emergency. It is considered prudent to maintain a level of reserve balances commensurate with risk, and an assessment to confirm the adequacy and robustness of balances is undertaken annually by the Section 151 officer as part of the budget setting process. The earmarked reserves and general policy statement for 2025-26 at Appendix 1 sets out the Council's approach to maintaining appropriate levels of reserves and general balances to meet known future commitments and to mitigate against unforeseen future events. The Council's usable revenue reserves are split between a general reserve, the general fund, and earmarked reserves that are held for specific purposes. Part of the Council's general fund is held as a strategic reserve to cover emergency events such as unforeseen financial liabilities or natural disasters. The general fund reserve is maintained at a minimum level of between 3 and 5% of the net revenue budget. As at 31 March 2024, the general reserve balance totalled £9.6 million, being 4.5% of the Council's 2023-24 approved net revenue budget. This year, we have also provided more detail on the categorisation of the Council's earmarked reserves, which is shown in Appendix 1 of Earmarked Reserves and General Balances Payment for 2025-26. The reserves balance at 31 March 2024 total £73.2 million, and this comprises of £24.5 million of reserves held for liabilities and risk, £7.8 million held for budget resilience, £5.8 million which will represent funds to support strategic priorities, £1.8 million of accounting reserves, £23.4 million in grants and contributions, and £9.9 million of balances held on behalf of schools. Earmarked reserve balances at 31 March 2024 detailed at Appendix A of Appendix 1 include £17.3 million of grant funding carried forward to 2024-25, and this represents amounts of grant funding that has been received with no outstanding grant conditions attached, but which have not yet been applied to relevant expenditure. In accordance with the principles of the CITFA Code of Practice on Local Authority Accounting and relevant accounting standards, these amounts are treated as earmarked reserves to be carried forward for application in future accounting periods. Forecast earmarked reserve balances for the 2024-25 and 2025-26 financial years are shown at Annex A, Appendix 1. At 31 March 2025, the forecast balance of earmarked reserves is £65.5 million and £55.6 million at 31st March 2026. And these balances will increase as new grants are received in future accounting periods. The Quarter 2 2024-25 budget report, which I presented to Cabinet in November 2024, reports a forecast overspend of £10.2 million at Quarter 2 before management action estimated at £8.2 million to reduce the forecast overspend to £2 million. Any overspend in 2024-25 must be funded using the Council's available reserves, and review of reserve balances will be undertaken as part of the process to finalise the outturn position for the year. In assessing the adequacy of the reserves, the Council's financial strategy aims to minimise the use of reserves in medium term and to replenish them to support future sustainability, enable the Council to respond to unexpected changes, and to invest in the continued transformation and improvement of its services. There are robust controls in place as part of routine budget monitoring arrangements to monitor in-year transfers to and from reserves and resulting reserve balances, and these transactions are subject to review as part of the annual audit of the statutory accounts. The risk assessment for 2025-26 has determined that a general fund balance of £9.6 million, which is unchanged from 2024-25, should be maintained. This is equivalent to 4.1% of the proposed operating budget of £231.5 million for 2025-26 and equates to between 2 and 3 weeks of net expenditure, and the full details of how this risk assessment has been conducted are set out at Annex C to the report. Cabinet approved a transfer of £11 million from the Business Rates Risk Reserve to establish a Budget Resilience Reserve, or Contingency Reserve, to mitigate against in-year cost pressures. As part of planned actions and management of any resulting in-year overspend, it is proposed that this reserve will be used to manage the impact of in-year cost pressures and volatility in demand across social care budgets in 2024-25. The remaining balance will be carried forward at 31 March 2025 in the Budget Resilience Reserve to manage future emerging risks and in-year budgetary pressures over the medium term. Allocation of reserve funding in each financial year will require application to the Council's S1501 officer and Cabinet approval to ensure that appropriate measures have been taken within each of the directorates. At the end of each financial year, any unused balance will be considered as part of the annual review of earmarked reserves. Annex A sets out the audited earmarked reserve balances at 1 April 2024 and forecast balances at 31 March 2025 and 31 March 2026. Annex B presents the reserves by category, noting reserves held for liability and risk, budget resilience, accounting purposes, to fund strategic priorities, and those which represent grant and other balances to be carried forward for expenditure in future years. Excluding schools balances, earmarked reserves are forecast to be 55.6 million at 31 March 2025 and 45.7 million at 31 March 2026. This position does not take into account the cumulative Dedicated Schools Grant, or DSG, deficit accounted for as an unusable reserve as permitted by statutory instrument. Further detail in respect of the DSG deficit is included in the Draft Revenue Budget Report 2025-26 and Medium Term Financial Strategy 2025-26 to 28-29. The general fund balance is forecast to be maintained at £9.6 million to 31 March 2026. A description of each reserve and explanation of risks to be managed and mitigated is detailed in Appendix A, with as examples the Business Rates Risk Reserve. This reserve is held to manage risks in the business rate regime, including the impact of changes in the level of business rate income and uncertainty over appeals. The Budget Resilience Reserve, and this reserve is held to mitigate the risk to the revenue budget of excessive cost pressures and volatility in demand across social care budgets. The use of earmarked reserve balances is in accordance with the Council's financial procedure rules, which are approved annually by the Audit and Governance Committee. The deposit of funds to an earmarked reserve enables a relevant body or person in the Council, such as Cabinet, individual Cabinet member or officer, to utilise the earmarked reserves for the purposes that the reserve was created. The relevant body or person must follow the standard decision-making protocols within the Council's constitution to utilise these funds. Annex A details all of the earmarked reserve balances, and as I mentioned earlier, Annex B shows the various categories of reserves. And finally, Annex C details the risk assessments that have been used for determining the appropriate levels of reserve balances for 2025-26. I'm therefore very pleased to endorse this report and propose that its two recommendations are approved by Cabinet. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Stoddart, for a comprehensive assessment of the reserves position. Cabinet members, any thoughts or comments that you wish to make? Yeah. Okay. Just all silent and in awe of Councillor Stoddart's control of the reserves. If you feel that way, I agree with you too. Right. Okay. Any further comments? If not, I'll turn to group leaders. Councillor James is no longer with us, so Councillor Harvey.
Yes, thank you, Leader, and well done, Councillor Stoddart. I've had to do this marathon cabinet meeting myself, and I hand it to you. Well done. Independence for Herefordshire, we welcome the additional information that's being provided here on the important element that is our reserve balances, what they're all about, what they're for, and indeed also welcome the information showing what the expected or rather planned use is of them over the coming financial year. I think that's really great to see that there. I think what we would ask for is a little bit more information, please, on the two kind of bucket lines that you've got in the detailed earmark reserves at Annex A to the annex to the report, if that's not a little bit too recursive. Those being the unused grants carried forward line of 17.3 million at the start of this financial year, and the other reserves individually under £1 million. I recognise that there are lots of little itty-bitty bits in there, but I think for members in advance of the council meeting on this, it would be helpful just to understand what the detail is that comprises those two bucket lines, and what the constraints and or plans are for the spending of those, or what their contingencies for, given that they are staying as earmarked.
Thank you for that. We note that that request, and if we can provide more clarity on that matter, we certainly will. Councillor Toynbee.
Yes, thank you. The Green Group is also very pleased to have this detail, to have it all set out so clearly. Yeah, we welcome that, because we're talking about huge amounts of money here, and residents as well like to know what is where and what's being moved from where to where and why. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Stoddart, if you wanted to comment.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. I have to say, I don't normally refer to them as bucket lists. It tends to be misconstrued. But you're quite right. Those two areas, we will send you a detailed breakdown of where they are. Thank you.
I think that will help the discussion when we come to that item in full council. Absolutely. And members will then have a clear idea about how that money can be moved and used accordingly. Right. Okay. So there's the recommendation proposed by Councillor Stoddart. I'll second that. All Cabinet members happy to approve? Good, thank you very much. We now move to the last item on the agenda item 10, which is the Council Tax Reduction Scheme. So it's to recommend to Council the 2025-2026 Local Council Tax Reduction Scheme. The item begins on page 185 of the agenda pack. And just the last time, Councillor Stoddart, if I can ask you to introduce the item.
Thank you very much, Leader. The report before you today recommends that the Council Tax Reduction Scheme is maintained at the maximum level in financial year 2025-26. This means that eligible households will receive the maximum level of discount for a further year. Council tax charges can be reduced if the bill payer meets certain set criteria contained in the Council Tax Reduction Scheme, which is available to working age and pensioner claimants. The pensioner CTR scheme is set nationally. However, the working age CTR is set locally by Herefordshire Council. Within Herefordshire, there are 11,335 bill payers that are currently in receipt of CTR, which comprises of 6,524 claims from working age applicants and 4,811 from pensioners. The existing local working age CTR scheme was approved by Council in February 2023 and is included in the document at Appendix 1, with the maximum discount maintained in 2024-25 to mirror those available to pensioner cases. This means that a 100% discount is awarded under CTR unless their income breaches the threshold, irrespective of the council tax band that the property falls into. This administration listens to members of the public, and during the public budget consultation, which took place between November and December 2024, the results report clearly show continuing support for continuing discount for council tax for those most in need, with support from the majority of respondents. Whilst no changes are proposed for 2025-26, The responses of the survey will support improvements and inform plans to increase participation in future rounds of consultation. Subsequently, we have brought forward this report to continue to provide this support to the individuals who require it. I would like, however, to highlight that in addition to the CTR scheme, the Council also provides other discounts, and these are listed on the Council's website. Maintaining the maximum discount in 2025-26 will have a positive impact on the community by minimising the debt burden on residents who struggle to pay their council tax charge. I'm therefore very pleased to endorse this report and propose that its recommendations are approved by Cabinet and put forward to full Council on the 7th of February. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stoddard. Any councillors from Cabinet like to make any comments? I mean, Councillor Swinglehurst.
Because I think we're all very aware, very conscious of cost of living and how hard it is for people out there. Am I right in thinking that there's a discretionary hardship fund for those people that are kind of on the edge, that are maybe not caught by these policies?
Yes, Councillor, you're correct. So the CTR sets out that very clear criteria, but those that sit on those transitional areas, there is the, I'll just look for the name, the Discretionary Hardship Fund, which deals with those issues there. And there are other, of course, as you know, through the top community area of the council website, there are lots of other grants that people can apply for. Thank you.
Okay, and with no further comments from Cabinet, I'll refer to group leaders for their comments, please. Councillor Toynbee.
Yes, there's a nice lot of reading here if you really want to go into all the detail, isn't there? Yes, the Green Group supports this, thank you very much. And just in relation to the other funds that are available to people, I really hope that we continue to publicise them as much as possible, because it can get a little bit complicated, all the various different pots. I know it goes through Talk Community, but the more we publicise it, the better. At this time of year when people are worried, they get the council tax bill and it's worrying. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Toynbee. And Councillor Harvey.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Yeah, we support the continuation of this at 100% for working age households. It was something that was brought in under our administration, and you know, it is a large amount of money in terms of the total value of the discount, but it's really important, particularly in a low-wage economy like Herefordshire, which has got pockets of deep deprivation, that we do continue to provide this. And you know, I'm glad to see that we can afford to continue to do it at the maximum level. Yeah, I do. I welcome the queries from the Deputy Leader on the discretionary hardship funds, but as I said, I think, you know, I mean, we did make provision for something extra. Those schemes are themselves administered according to certain rules, and sometimes it is helpful to have a fund that is there that creates more discretion for officers outside of those criteria to respond to individual cases according to their professional judgment. And Independents for Herefordshire feel that is something that is lacking at the moment, particularly with the maximum council tax uplift again.
Thank you to group leaders for their comments. I think that, you know, hopefully the debate on the 7th of February will bring more attention to the fact that there is this hardship fund as well as the council tax relief fund. So perhaps a good, healthy debate on the 7th will raise the public profile of the point about these funds available to those households who do come into difficulty when meeting council tax payments. So yes, I look forward to that debate. And also thank you to Councillor Harvey for pointing out that there are pockets of deep deprivation in Herefordshire, and that is why we were looking to government to help us with that, because deprivation doesn't happen just in urban areas. It certainly happens in rural areas as well as areas in our urban areas, because we do have urban areas in Herefordshire. But Councillor Stoddard, did you have any other observations for Cabinet?
Thank you, Leader. Yes, picking up on Councillor Harvey's point about deprivation. I mean, that's exactly the point we're trying to make, and we have made extensively to central government, that there is such a thing as rural deprivation as well as urban deprivation, which I think may have fallen on deaf ears. However, rest assured, we will not rest easy on our case, and the S151 officer has been exceptionally hardworking in producing information to the RSN and other organisations. Can I also, picking up on what Councillor Harvey was saying about other ways of helping, Officer Emily Lowe and Amy Williams and the Top Community Hub teams do a fantastic job on getting that information on all those small grants that individuals can claim on, etc., including the home upgrade grants and all that sort of stuff. You know, that team do a fantastic job in getting that information out to parish councils, but also to other support groups through the Top Community Hubs. And I would really like to publicise that information, again, accessible through our website, but also through point-to-point. So it's a multifaceted approach we take on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Stoddart, and you're recommending, you're proposing the recommendation, and happy to second, and all in favour of that recommendation. Thank you. So move on to agenda item 11, which is to close the meeting. So I'd like to thank everyone for their attendance, both members of the public, councillors and cabinet. The next meeting is scheduled for the 27th of February at 2:30. So I will now formally close the meeting. All members of the public are requested to leave the building promptly. Please make sure that you've taken all of your personal possessions with you and return your pass on the way out. Thank you. Can I have confirmation that the live stream